In this episode, I am joined by Lawrence and Rodney as we talk about open licensing and the new classic fantasy publications. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 49, Licenses, Imperatives and Companions. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I'm your host, Inwils, and welcome to September. I always say it, but if you blink, it seems that you can easily miss half the year. September in the United Kingdom means the return to work after the summer vacation and the start of a new academic year for schools, colleges and universities. When I was at university as a student, not as an academic, I remember starting and running a Dungeons and Dragons society. This was an excellent place to meet other students and to adventure across wildernesses and down multi-level dungeons. Before we get to the chat section, I wanted to reflect on dungeon adventures and where they have gone. When I started to play Dungeons and Dragons, it was literally Dungeons and Dragons. We would venture down a dungeon in a hope of reaching the final room that housed a mighty dragon with all its treasures. It appears that dungeons, however, have gone out of favour. They have been replaced by town adventures, haunted keeps, or even treacherous treks across the wilderness. But the dungeons held something very special in my memories of the game. It was so satisfying to trace out the map on squared paper, using fond phrases such as "the corridor continues 20 foot south and then in the next 10 foot turns east." Rooms would often contain random sets of monsters that would be divided equally among the characters when we entered. Often playing a magic user, I would be left swinging my staff hopelessly at the goblin, having just cast my single spell I had, a magic missile, in the previous room. And with my mage only having 3 hit points, it was, I can tell you, very much touch and go in combat. There was that randomness and illogical placement of monsters, one door containing a room with 5 goblins in it and the room directly opposite it with 3 bugbears. I guess they had strict orders not to leave their rooms or to communicate with anyone. There was also those items of equipment that were dedicated to dungeon crawls: iron spikes, flaming torches, and at least one 10-foot long pole. The marching order with the smallest races at the front so the second row could fire missile weapons over their heads, and those secret doors that the DM would hint at by stating that there appeared to be no other doors leading out of a room. And finally, that sudden feeling of joy when you eventually found the entrance to the second level. You would probably leave the dungeon then to gain levels before returning to see what wonders and dangers the second level held for us. I certainly remember dungeon adventures very fondly. Let me know whether or not you do as well. But before we get pulled into a well of reminiscing, let's move on. In this episode, I am lucky enough to be joined by two experts, both on licensing, publications, and classic fantasy. Let me start by allowing them to introduce themselves. Take it away.
Sure. My name is Rodney Leary, and I'm the line manager for Classic Fantasy, as well as the author of Classic Fantasy and the upcoming Classic Fantasy Imperative.
Fantastic. And news of that coming up later on in this episode, which is exciting. And I'm also joined today with Lars. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Lawrence Whitaker. I'm the co-owner and co-founder of the Design Mechanism, and I suppose you could say I'm Rod's boss, but really it's not like that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
We are very
boss
good.
I ever had.
That was $50 well spent. I tell you.
So we're going to start off today by talking about open licensing, and I have to come totally clean here. I have no idea about open licensing, apart from it was in the news all of a sudden when certain things happened with D&D 5th edition or D&D Beyond and things like that. So who would like to educate me, what is open licensing?
I'll give you what I know about open licensing. So open licensing has been around for quite a long time. It started, and Rob, you can Rod, keep me honest on this. It started around the time of D&D 3rd edition. Wizards of the Coast brought out that they bought TSR, they bought the rights to D&D, and they created what they called the open game license. And the idea behind that was third parties could now create their own compatible material for Dungeons and Dragons without having to pay a royalty, without having to seek permission, as long as they abided by certain terms held within the license, which became called the OGL. And it was very, very successful. There was a huge explosion in gaming and third-party production around the early 2000s when the OGL first started. Companies like Mongoose in the UK made their name based on open game licensing publishing, because they could now create, using the D&D 3rd edition rules, compatible games of whatever type they wanted. So it created a bedrock for lots and lots of third-party companies to become very well established. You had Paizo, Frog God Games, Green Ronin, lots of very well-known names became that way on the back of the open game license. So it's been around for a long time. Now, there were some moves towards the end of last year by Wizards of the Coast to change the way the open game license were. And I've cut out a whole load of history here. So it's had its ups and downs, but they tried to change the way that it worked. They wanted to rescind the old open game license, create a new one with far stricter terms, which would have really throttled a lot of third-party creators. It would have involved paying licensing fees. It would have completely negated lots of old products. So there was a huge controversy about the way in which all of this was handled. There was a lot of backtracking by Wizards of the Coast, yet more controversy about how they did all that backtracking. But in the end, they decided, we'll keep it exactly as it is, more or less. However, the damage had been done. And it was announced towards the end of last year, at the start of this year, that Paizo were going to become, along with other games companies, the impetus for a new, completely unrescindable open game license that anybody could use. It would not have the same terms and conditions as the OGL. It would be completely its own thing. It would be way, way, way less restrictive. And so any publisher would be able to release their content under this new open license, which is called ORC for open role-playing content. I believe that's the acronym. And
Right.
so it's been in development and backed by a lot of very high-profile names. Paizo, obviously, Chaosium, people like Frog God Games, Greenlight, lots of different people all lined up behind the license. So it's now going to become a competing license with the OGL, but it will be its own thing with a lot less restrictions to it. So over the past few months, it's been through a couple of iterations. They've now finalized the iterations, and the orc is out in the open. So it is a working license. Companies can use it. Chaosium have already started. They've released their basic role-playing rule system under the orc license. We're preparing to do something similar ourselves. I don't know of any other companies that have released anything yet, but there will be other companies building up to it. So it's gained a lot of momentum and a lot of interest. And the idea is that you give other people permission to use your game mechanics however they want. So if somebody wants to take basic role playing and create their own version, a science fiction version, a superhero version, spy, whatever they want, they can do so. They don't need to get permission from Chaosium. They don't need to put anything special in there apart from the terms that the Orc license requires, and they have to release their content as open content as well. So if you as a producer say you can use our rule system, all we're asking for is A, you attribute to us correctly in the format that we designate, and B, you make your content open as well, so others can also take advantage of it. So you're paying it forward. That's the idea behind it. Now, you can restrict certain content if you've created your own campaign names, if there are certain rules or things that you actually do want to remain proprietary, you can specify those as reserved content. They can't be used without permission. But ostensibly, anything that is published under the Orc is free for anybody to come and use. So Ian, if you wanted to take classic fantasy imperative or even Mithras imperative, which we will release under the Orc license, and create, the inwils role-playing game from it, you could do so. You don't need our permission.
I'll make a note of that now. The inwils. Fantastic.
Hey, you've already got an island in Wills.
I do.
So, yeah.
Anything you would like to add to that, Rod?
No, it's pretty straightforward. I'm fairly familiar with how open game licenses work because I'd made several plans in the past to actually publish under the open game license prior to getting an awesome email from Lawrence. So I didn't have to, but I did a lot of research in it, probably 6 or 7 years ago. So, and it was good. I mean, you were definitely, even under the original OGL, you were given a lot of freedom. It was kind of iffy if that freedom could ever be taken away from you. And that's one of the things the Orc license is letting you know right up front that cannot happen. So,
got you. So what does this mean for like the design mechanism? What does it actually, what do you see, both you see as the advantages, but maybe any of the negatives as well?
We've always been quite careful about releasing things under an open license. People have come to us and said, hey, why isn't Mithras released under the OGL? And the reason for it is, we put a lot of work into developing the game. And although we have stood on the shoulders of giants ourselves, Mithras is based very much on basic role-playing, on RuneQuest, and that family of D100 games that have been around for a long, long time. We still put a lot of work into developing certain concepts, certain themes. But that was 10, 11 years ago now. And the world has moved on. The world has changed. And we've had a lot of interest from people saying, hey, I would like to publish something compatible with Mithras. So we created what we call the Gateway license. And that is a very simple license that says you have our permission to publish content that's compatible with Mithras. You can say it's compatible. You can quote a certain amount of the Mithras rules in your game, but we want some approval over it. So we don't want people making something completely inappropriate. We don't want something that could bring the company's reputation into disrepute. We don't want people doing bad things that could reflect on the company. So we kind of locked things down a little bit. But as I said, that was over the past 10 years. The Mithras Gateway has been pretty successful for us. M-Space is released under the Mithras Gateway. Matthew Eager releases all his stuff under the Gateway license. So there's lots of things that are produced under that. But really now with the Orc, the world has shifted. The gaming world has shifted again on its axis. And I think if we do not respond to that change, one, we get left behind as a company. And two, we don't need to be so proprietary anymore. We really don't. We're very proud of the work that we've done. Others can take it and innovate with it now. So we decided we will go open content as well. So we've been looking at ways in which to do that. And the logical way would be to release Mithras Imperative, which is our cut down, quick start version of Mithras rules. Make that completely open. People won't need to ask for permission, don't need to get any approvals. We'll make that open content. And when all this was going on, I started to think, well, yeah. There are lots of people that are not very happy with Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons. I know a lot of other companies were thinking the same thing. And I thought, well, we have a D&D-like game in classic fantasy. Why don't we do an imperative version, a chopped down quick start version that hopefully will help bring some new players into the hobby, certainly appeal to those that like classes, levels, traditional monsters, traditional fire and forget magic, and all the things that are associated with D&D. We do that incredibly well as part of classic fantasy. And it just so happened that Rod had spent a couple of years working on a trimmed down version of classic fantasy that was more or less ready to go. And I will now hand over to Rod so he can talk about that.
Tell us, Rod, tell us about classic fantasy imperative.
Yeah, it was originally going to be a player's handbook for classic fantasy, something that, you could theoretically have multiple copies of at the table. And it was going to be self-contained. It was going to have all the rules you needed to play, but not necessarily monsters and treasure. It was just more or less going to be something that the players could use at the table and not have to switch from book to book to look up how combat works or, how, the charts and tables to create a character being in one book. Now they're all, they were all going to be all together just to simplify things. And for whatever reason that fell through and it did not become a thing. And but so it was always kept on the back burner. I mean, I never got rid of it. Lawrence never got rid of it. We planned on possibly doing something with it down the road, but maybe not necessarily in the same format, which is exactly what we ended up doing. We used it as the basis for our OGL version of classic fantasy. We cut it down a little bit more to make sure it fit within a certain, size and everything that we were looking for. And so it didn't take really hardly any time for it to go from player's handbook to an open game license as, a system reference document, whatever. And I think I worked on it for a couple months, maybe, to make those changes. And so it was good that it had been written originally. It feels good that it wasn't wasted time,
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, and I'm very, very happy with the end result.
Fantastic.
I think it's a beautiful looking book. I can't wait for people to get it in their hands.
So what's actually in classic fantasy imperative? What actually comes in the book?
It's got a smaller amount of rank 1 through 3 spells, for instance, but it also has a good assortment of rank 4 through 5 spells, making it useful all the way up to, well, D&D is equivalent to 20th level. So you could literally buy this book, download the book for free, the PDF or whatever, and use it forever if that's all you wanted to do. Now, the other books are still important because while it does have a small assortment of example monsters and a small assortment of example magic items, the bulk of those are still in the main classic fantasy book. So already owning the main classic fantasy book is not a bad thing, because you're going to want access to all of those monsters and magic items anyway. The other thing that we pared down on is character classes. You've got 4 of the core character classes that every D&D player knows, as opposed to the 12 that's in Mithras Classic Fantasy. You got your fighter, you got your mage, you got your rogue, and you got your cleric. So, those are the core ones. And anybody that wants to could still draw the other character classes from the other Mithras books and still use them. It's just these are your core ones, which form the backbone of any fantasy role-playing game anyway. So.
Yeah. And it seems like a really effective stepping stone to be introduced to classic fantasy or to Mithras without investing a huge amount of money to sort of see
for the princely sum of $0 or pounds or currency of your choice. You can have the PDF of this game. You will not need anything else to play classic fantasy or indeed Mithras. You will have everything that you need there. It's got full character creation rules, combat rules, skill rules, spot rules for things like fires, traps, that kind of thing. As Rod has said, sample monsters, a load of magic. The bulk of the book is magic. It's the different spells. That takes up by far the biggest page count in this book. You have got a very nice, still quite light, but still quite detailed system for zero cost.
I was just going to say, there's actually a lot more spells squeezed in there, even cutting them down. If I had to guess, like the rank 1 magic user spells, which are the equivalent to in D&D, that'd be like level 1 and 2 magic user spells. There's probably close to 30 of them just for the rank 1 spells. And then you still have rank 2 through 5 spells as well. And that's just for magic user. So, there's still a lot of spells, a real lot of spells. And, but it's still only a fraction of what's available in full Mithras Classic Fantasy, which is adding even more when the companion comes out, but that's for later in the video.
Yeah. So what we talked a lot about the sort of like the player side of things. Is there everything in both of the imperative rules for a GM? Can a GM pick those up and just do it and GM adventures?
Yeah. Yes, you can. You have a complete game. It's a trimmed down version of the full Mithras rules, but you've got more than enough in there for a GM to be able to guide someone through character creation, know how skills work, run combats, run magic. With Mithras Imperative, we have a super system in there for playing superheroes, if you wish. So there's a lot of material that's baked into these trimmed down systems that they're not lacking in any way as games. They remain fully compatible with the main rule books, but as a basis, and this is the beauty of the open license, if you want to go off and now create your own Mithras-based version of something, you can do so without having to come to me and say, Lars, I want to create this. Can I have your permission? Because I've got to think about who else is doing it. Are we doing something similar? All that's gone. You can, if you want to create your own version of classic fantasy and create your own version of character classes, like the Mega Paladin or whatever really takes your fancy, you can do that. And you will have all the templates for it. A lot of the magic, a lot of the work has been done for you. And you can copy that material verbatim and reproduce it. And we don't mind.
And so if I produce a new class via the license, can I actually profit from that? Can I sell that?
Yeah.
And then
yes,
I might see a part-time job coming up here.
You can, as long as you abide by the terms of the Orc license, and it's the first thing in the introduction, how the license works, how you must attribute to us, and all you've got to do is say, this is based on classic fantasy written by Rodney Leary and published by the Design Mechanism. And as long as you don't use any reserved content, and we spell out what is reserved content, you can do whatever you like and sell it. And we hope that you can retire early and buy that.
Ian, I do want to point out that while Inwils Isle and Inwils the Sage is reserved content, I think I could make a pass and let you use it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, yeah, we will make an exception on that one, but we want 50%.
50%, yeah, 50% of a quid. You can have that. Do you know, I'm sat here, and this sounds really geeky, but I'm actually getting goosebumps about this because the possibilities here are huge. Not only, I mean, the first thing that I'm really excited about is that people can be introduced to both Mythras Classic Fantasy and Mythras free, and they can actually experience what a fantastic game it is, both of them, you know. And that's almost like, I'm often saying I wish they would always release demos on computer games, because you know, sometimes I would play the demo and then not buy the game. And this is almost like that. They're saying, you're saying, here's a demo, play it, see what you like. And then if you want more, you can go and buy this and that and that and that, which seems unbelievable. Plus, the other thing that I was excited about are all the new creators that are going to be out there and being able to use the basis, which are both fantastic systems, very robust, workable, really good, to build further things on. And I can imagine lots of things coming out in the future, which is really good for the system as a whole. Anything you would like to say, either of you, to people who are sat at home now or in the car thinking, oh, shall I get this? Shall I give it a go or not? What would be your advice to them?
Get it. I mean, it's a free download. It isn't going to plug up your computer. I mean, download it, check it out. If it's something you don't like, well, there's a little scrap bucket you can drag it over to. But if you love it, it's opening a door to a whole bunch of other Mythras and classic fantasy related products that you can just go crazy with. I mean, we just got so many awesome books and lines available. You can't lose by just downloading it and checking it out. That's what I would say to somebody that's on the fence, you know.
Exactly what Rod's saying. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Mythras Imperative has been around for a few years. I think we released it 6 years ago. So that's been out for a while. But what you haven't been able to do with Mythras Imperative is use it freely as the basis for your own development. We're going to change all of that. We're starting with Classic Fantasy Imperative. It follows very closely the structure of Mythras Imperative. The two are 100% compatible. But it's obviously focused around the traditional dungeoneering experience, you know, the traditional things that D&D does incredibly well and are very popular, and quite rightly so. You can take that and make your own version of it. That is what's hugely exciting to us. And I mean, this is not going to be a small pamphlet, by the way. This is a 152-page PDF. So we're not talking, you know, quite often quick starts are a few pages that introduce things. This is actually a quite meaty, free book that we're providing here. And the reason that we wanted to do that was, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. We're not going to do it half-heartedly. We're going to give the system out to the community. We want to give not everything away, but enough for people to be able to really build something worthwhile. That is the main scope of this. So I say, download it, have fun with it, use as much or as little as you want, build something new with it, build something crazy with it. Don't build something that will get you arrested, but do have lots of fun with it. That's what we would say there. And we will follow up by releasing Mythras Imperative under the Orc license as well. That'll be a few months down the road, but Classic Fantasy, Classic Fantasy Imperative is one lovely looking book. Oh, and here's the added benefit. When we released Classic Fantasy, we had some problems with the layout and certain tables didn't reproduce all that well. We've completely corrected that. in Classic Fantasy Imperative. The tables are lovely and clean. They've been quadruple checked, and believe me, Rod and I have had more grief with the tables than we've had with anything else, and shading on tables. But they are nice and clean. And even if you already have Classic Fantasy and have been playing it for a long time, you will find something new in there. It's not going to invalidate your core rules. It's not going to invalidate your existing campaign. Although it replicates some of the things that will be in another book that we'll talk about, The Unearthed Companion. There's a lot that's completely brand new and reserved in The Unearthed Companion that you won't find in Classic Fantasy Imperative. So they all work together. They all have their own niche. They all have their own place. It's a great time for getting into the system.
Brilliant. I'm super excited about it. I'm sure lots of people are. And we've hinted about it for a while. So let's talk about the Classic Fantasy Companion. Is that the right name for it?
Well, it's the full title is it's the Unearthed Companion. Classic Fantasy Unearthed Companion. So.
And I think you actually spoke about it maybe coming back. I think we delved into Classic Fantasy 1st of April 2022. That was the episode that we did. And I think there was talk about it then. So tell us more about it, Ron. Tell us what's in store.
Well, the best part is it's been turned in. So that's awesome. And so, it's currently going through art and development. So major progress there. But as far as what's in it, it's essentially the long-awaited part 2 to Mithras Classic Fantasy. Whereas Mithras Classic Fantasy took you spell-wise up to rank 3, and even most of the monsters were on the lower level, This takes you the rest of the way up to rank 5, which again, D&D equivalent to like rank 20. So level 20. So you've got some really powerful spells in there, power word kill, time stop, all those really, really powerful spells. And the fun part there was trying to balance them for a system that you don't have more hit points than a bull elephant,
Yes, exactly.
So a lot of balancing went in, but I think we found the sweet spot right where those need to be. And, so, it's got you more powerful spells. It has more powerful monsters. It has demons and devils and Draco-liches and all of the really, really powerful things. And then your higher rank magic items. The really, really powerful magic items, those are covered as well. So it's going to be a good size book. I'm going to say probably just short of the original size of Classic Fantasy. Maybe 50 pages shorter, somewhere around there. But it's
going to be around 250.
Okay, pages. 250 pages. So it's going to be a nice size book. So, but yeah, it's packed full of stuff. So,
yeah, and it was fantastic to have that initial episode with you, because I thought when originally Mithras Classic Fantasy does levels ranks 1 to 5, is it, or 1 to I thought those were like levels.
Oh yeah, no.
Compared to D&D, but that's not the case at all, isn't it?
No, rank 1 is the equivalent to like levels 1 to 3, but then you have rank 2, which is like level 5. Rank 3 would be level 10. Rank 4 would be 15, and rank 5 is 20 or higher. So yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of powerful spells and magical items in there, which is...
I think when I was going through Rod's manuscript for this, I was reading through the spell, and I was making notes like, you do realize you're going to kill everybody, don't you? This spell's going to kill everybody. Yeah. You've killed everybody again. And it's... there are some seriously... TP cases.
But what's great about those powerful spells that kill everybody, there are powerful spells to bring them back, so you can keep on playing.
Yeah,
it is based on a world famous fantasy role playing game, so bringing them back isn't necessarily an issue. So,
and I really like those powerful spells. I really like those powerful monsters, because I think sometimes players can get very blasé about how powerful they are when all of a sudden, you know, you can turn the tide on there, turn the table on there, and then
the bad guys can use them too. So
yeah,
Yep.
So with the companion, they'll need the original classic fantasy, Mythras classic fantasy first, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's for those people. Well, they could actually buy the Imperative Mythras Classic Fantasy and
Yep.
you know, I'll have it all together. And there's lots of modules and adventures out for Classic Fantasy. I know because I've got them. Are there any more modules coming out or adventures coming out for that higher bracket?
Well, we already have one or two that are at that higher bracket. The one that deals with Classic Fantasy's version of Egypt with the god Set. That's for rank 5, so that's a D&D equivalent to 20th level adventure. But we do want to have some more adventures that definitely cover, you know, the rank 4 to rank 5 range. So yeah, that's definitely on our to-do list. So
I really like those high level campaigns. I get really bored at low levels.
Well, I can tell you from experience, Ian, that with Classic Fantasy, even playing a low-level adventure against goblins and kobolds can feel like a high-level adventure just because you're so squishy. You know, you don't have a whole pile of hit points to rely on. You know, I remember a story, my brother playing Valamir Drake, one of the example characters. My brother's character is Valamir Drake, the Paladin. I remember he charged through a door in a dungeon that was infested by goblins, and he got pinned to the door frame by goblins throwing javelins at him, and he's literally bleeding out. And these are just goblins.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get to him, but the healer couldn't get to him because the door frame was blocked, and he almost lost his character in like the third adventure he ever played in. And that was just goblins. I mean,
excellent.
It's a whole different deal.
Very, very much so. And I think that's something that both Mythras and Mythras Classic Fantasy does so well.
Yeah.
Would the, the adventures that are already out for Mythras Classic Fantasy, would they be able to use the imperative rules to play?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So that not only is it free, but they could then go out and buy, because there's quite a few adventures.
I think we got close to 10. And plus there's some, I think there's 3 adventures that were actually published under the Gateway license, so not by us. So there are like 3 other adventures for Classic Fantasy that are out there. So
fantastic. So when is this companion due? I'm super excited already about it. When is it going to be due? When is it going to be published, do you think?
Well, Lawrence, you're on.
So we get more questions about 2 books in particular. One is Mythic Greece, the other is The Unearthed Companion. Mythic Greece, I still don't have definitive news about. At least with Unearthed Companion, it is written, it's edited. Rod's doing a few last-minute corrections because we picked up a few things editing Classic Fantasy Imperative that we thought, need to check the companion as well. But art direction is finished. We will be commissioning art very, very soon, probably as early as next week. As soon as art starts rolling in, which is usually about a month after we start the art commissioning process, we will begin layout. So I'm hoping before the end of the year. It's our priority book. You know, we're working on Classic Fantasy over time between now and December. So we very much hope it will be out this year. If it isn't, it will be the first release in 2024. So those people that are still waiting for it, please be a bit more patient. I mean, it is, as Rod said, a huge book. It's a very complicated book, both in terms of layout, getting the mechanics right, making sure it works with now Imperative. So we put a lot of effort into it, and we're still trying to make it the best it can be. So I'd love to say it's going to be in the next couple of months, but it won't be. But Classic Fantasy Imperative will be out during September. It's going to be a September release. We are just waiting for our proof copies to arrive. Once we have been through those, done any last corrections we need to do, it will be available in September. So the companion, end of the year.
So companion orders for Christmas, that's, or save your Christmas
Yeah.
money for the new year when it arrives. Where can they download Classic Fantasy Imperative? Where will that be available?
That will be available on the Design Mechanism website and store. It'll be available on drive-through. You'll be able to order a print-on-demand copy if you want a hard copy of the PDF version of the rules from Lulu as well. It's going to be available in 3 formats. There will be a nice print-on-demand book, which you do have to pay for. You need to pay for that. The PDF, free of charge. You can download that for free if you don't want, and you know what? If you want to download the PDF and go and get it printed, either on your own at Lulu or from your local print shop, go ahead and do so. And then there will be an SRD, which is a system reference document. And this is a Word document which has got identical text to the PDF, but it's in a Word format. So very simple formatting, but it's completely consistent. And that is really for people that want the rules so they can easily copy and paste when they're doing their own development.
Yeah. Got you. So it allows that transfer. Yeah.
No arts, just the tables, just the words, common fonts, common styles, very easy for you to use. So that's the way it'll be. And the SRD and the PDF, whenever you download those,
Fantastic.
You get both
so
together.
There's lots coming for Classic Fantasy, definitely between September and Christmas. Anything else that either of you would like to say? Anything that's up and coming that you can tease the listeners with? Anything like that?
Yes, we have a scenario that this one has been long in the making. Again, it's called Curse of Triton. It's a scenario for Mythic Constantinople. I have finally signed off on the proofs for it, and I've been sort of holding it back to release around the same time as Classic Fantasy Imperative, just so I can get all the press releases out and cover both products. So that will be out very soon. Things that we are also working on, there's a scenario in the works for Destined called Power Outage. So some superhero goodness. You'll be pleased about
gaming
that.
system. I love it. I love it.
After the Unearthed Companion, Mythic Venice will go into the production queue, as well as a Fiora Cheetah supplement by Alex Green called Suspicious. I've forgotten the name. Isn't that horrible? Something Liaison. Dangerously something Liaisons. That's a mini campaign. But yes, I think there's a lot going on.
We actually had Alex on the 3rd episode of Mithras Matters. It was called Politics and Poison Rings, and he was one of the first people. And before that, we had Tread Carefully in the Mire, when we talked about Mythic Britain. No.
Oh gosh, yes, Mythic Britain. We have some. We have Mythic Britain Armorica coming up.
Right. Is there a supplement for Mythic Britain called Water something?
Yes, Waterlands.
I think that's what that was.
Yes, that's what that was.
Yeah, so it's amazing how long Mithras Matters has been going for. I think episode 48 was 4 years. 4 years. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
It's been a heck of a journey for you, and you've done wonderful things with Mithras Matters.
So and really good and positive to get more people into the system and enjoying this system, etc. It's been fantastic talking to you both. I really get excited about all these new outcomes and new products coming out. And I am planning, Rod, just so you know, to do a one-off adventure with Classic Fantasy and actually play it with my group and do an actual play just to give it a bit of viewing time.
Imperative will be perfect for it then, because it's got everything you need all on one. Character creation will be so simple because you don't have to jump from book to book, and it's going to be great. And the smaller assortment of monsters and treasure is still plenty to run probably 4 or 5 adventures without repetition. There's still enough diversity in there that you could run a few adventures without seeing goblins again if that was your choice.
And all my players can download it as well and have their copy in front of them. So I think that would be absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much for taking time to come along and feature on Mithras Matters. I really do appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Well, thanks for inviting us.
So many exciting publications on the horizon, and we will be using the Mithras Classic Fantasy Imperative rules for our next actual play session. So do check out our Twitch and YouTube channel to see how it goes. Remember, if you would like to contribute to the podcast, then why not just drop me an email or message and let me know what you would like to cover. We are always looking for reviews or chats with people. So if you are interested, you can email me at inwils@gmail.com or send me a message on the forums or on the Discord. In the future, we have an episode about artists and artwork, and also one about creating cities for your campaign world. So lots to look forward to throughout the year. And that's it. Another episode of Mithras Matters completed. Don't forget you can check out all my content by following my YouTube channel and the campaign areas on World Anvil. I really do appreciate your support, so thank you to each and every one of you. And don't forget to check out the Discord and the Tapper Talk forums. There are great people there sharing their ideas within discussions. So until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat to you all again in October. Until then, I hope all your opposed rolls succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you.